In this video, we're going to be talking about making selections, and we're not going to show you every single selection option available in EasyStone because there's a million of them, but we do want to talk a little bit about making selections in CorelDRAW and some really specialized functionality in EasyStone that makes making selections so much easier. One of the most important things when it comes to doing rhinestone design is being able to isolate and make different types of selections. So there's some functionality in CorelDRAW which is really nice, gives us some flexibility, and then where CorelDRAW leaves off, EasyStone will pick up and simplify the process for us in certain circumstances. But first we have to have some basic understanding of CorelDRAW and how it makes its selections. The first thing we have to know how to do is how to add to and subtract from a selection. So if I select one stone and I hold a shift key and I'm just going to do every other and change the color. Okay, so you're really simple. You just hold your shift key down and you can change color that way and isolate your stones that way. Now if I have several stones selected, holding the shift key would remove stones from the selection as well. So shift key will add to and subtract from your selection. So that's the first thing that you should know about. The next thing you should know about is there's two main selection tools here in CorelDRAW, which is your pick tool, and for CorelDRAW X6 users, the freehand pick tool. Both of them we use constantly in rhinestone design. So let's just start with our pick tool. When I make a selection, like so, you can see that some of the stones are completely within the blue marquee. Some of the stones are just touching the blue marquee but aren't completely inside. So by default, CorelDRAW is going to select only those stones that are completely encompassed. So we'll go ahead and let go of our selection, change the stone color, and only those stones that were completely encompassed have changed color because those are the only ones that are selected. Now, there is an option here in CorelDRAW that if we hold down the Alt key and make a selection, now we have a different story. You could see some of the stones are completely encompassed, but some of the stones the marquee is only touching. If you look in the second row, there are several stones in the second row where the marquee is just touching. None of those stones in the second row is the marquee completely encompassing. And if you look at the very top stone there on the left, you can see it's just barely grazing that stone. But because we have the Alt key selected, when I let go of my mouse button, you'll see that yes, those stones that were just barely grazing that marquee have now been selected. So there are lots of times when we go in to make a selection where we can't quite fully encompass something, but we can just graze it with a marquee and be able to select it. So let me show you an example here. Let's go ahead and change these stones back to red. So let's say we're working on a design and I want to take this inside ring and I want to change its color. Well, we've already removed our stone paths, so these are individual stones that we can't really manipulate very easily. I mean, we could, select one, hold our shift key down, and select every other single stone around the ring, but, that's kind of craziness. So we have another option here in CorelDRAW, which is our freehand pick tool, and this is a perfect tool for the job. If we don't have EasyStone, this is the next best thing, is the freehand pick tool. And so because we don't want to have to sit and fully encompass, what we're going to do is take our freehand pick tool, just start right here in the middle and drag, but before we do that, hold down your Alt key, then click and drag. And all we're going to do is we're just going to graze these stones. Okay, now I'm not very good at controlling my mouse, but that's all we want to do. We want to just graze those stones. But here's the neat thing about CorelDRAW, is when you make a selection, especially when you're selecting stones like this, do you see that little tiny tick mark that it's adding along the way? That tells us this is what CorelDRAW saw us go over. So we can see at a glance what stones are selected and which ones aren't. And it would be pretty easy for us to go back in and pick up a few. See this one? This has a tick mark, and this has a tick mark, and this has a tick mark, but this one don't. So we can add to the selection, and now you see that tick mark. So now we know that's selected. All right, I don't really worry too much about it because we'll change the color, and you can see, oh, yep, see we picked up a couple that we didn't intend, but we also missed a couple as well, right? So we can go back in, hold down the Alt key, and just again, and that's not a CorelDRAW thing. That's not a CorelDRAW flaw. It's me not having great control over my mouse. So none of those stones, you can see none of those stones have been completely encompassed, but now all those stones that we want to change the color, they've all been ran over with a Mack truck. So you can see the tracks that it left behind. So now all those things, of course, will be picked up, and you can see those little tick marks all the way down and around. Now, when you're using that freehand pick tool, the more stones you have in your design, the longer it takes to process. Okay, so don't be discouraged, because right now you can see it's thinking, it's thinking, it's thinking, it's thinking, it's thinking, it's thinking. What it's doing is it's comparing all the stones in the design to that marquee that we created, and then says, okay, these are the ones that are intersecting, and then it allows us to go ahead and change those out. All right, so that's the next important thing. The first important thing that we learned was how to add to and subtract from a selection with our Shift key. And then the next most important thing is we have two options. If we just use either of our pick tools, anything inside the marquee is going to be selected. That's completely inside the marquee. But if we want things selected that the marquee is just barely grazing, then we have to use the Alt option. Okay. Now let's take a look at some specialized functionality. Just a couple of quick things here in EasyStone that will make your life easier. All right. So what we can do here in EasyStone is we have this S button. This S button does a couple of things that are really cool. Let me show you. First of all, we're just going to draw out a line of stones, and we're going to delete our stone paths. So there are many, 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 many times where we need to select stones between 2 points. So if I select my one stone and I select the other stone at the other end and hit S, EasyStone will pick up everything in between. Very, very, very handy when you're wanting to pick up stones that are in a straight line for some reason. You could just select the first stone and the last stone. You can see the tick mark is there and there, but not on any of the intermediate stones. So hitting S will go ahead and pick up all those stones in between. If for some reason you were to select 3 stones and hit S, warning, 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 you cannot do this. And it tells us we can only select 2, okay? So it's in that situation, it's expecting 2. So let's go ahead and delete this. All right, so now let's look at the next cool thing that we can do in regards to this little S button. The S button, if you have 2 stones selected, it'll select everything in between. And I should point out too, it's not just 2 stones. So let's just say we had a star shape. We'll go ahead and make many, many copies. We'll even offset it, just so you can see how this works. All right, so we're going to select the first star and the last star and hit S, and you can see it picks up everything in between, because what it's doing is actually drawing a straight line between those 2 objects, and anything that's intersecting that straight line, it's picking up. That's essentially what it does. So it doesn't just necessarily work on things that are on a perfect straight line. You know, it can be all cattywampus as long as it's barely touching. See, if we were to draw a straight line from the center to center, you can see that the reason that all those stars were picked up in between was because those stars are just barely grazing that straight line. All right, so that is S select between. But getting back to our original example here, you could see how we use the freehand pick tool to select and isolate these inside stones to get that that selection done. And certainly that's a big improvement in here in CorelDRAW X6 with that freehand pick tool. Previous versions of CorelDRAW did not have that functionality. So definitely a nice improvement there. But we do have another option here in EasyStone that will make the selection process even easier than the freehand pick tool. And what we're going to do here is we're going to draw out a circle. I'm just using the 3-point ellipse tool for this example. Okay, so if we look, this path right here does not touch these stones. So we're going to make it touch. But now that circle does touch those stones. So now when we hit S, it's going to behave differently because we have a different scenario. So what it's done is any stone that path touched, it picked up. So see, now we're able to change out that color. So if we want to change, and that's a very, very powerful tool, that select on a curve option. So we'll go back to our 3-point curve tool. So I want to isolate the third line in, change the color, third line in. Okay, over here, it's not touching the third line. There it is. There it is. You can see, there it is. So now that is touching, now when I hit select, it's going to find all the stones that are intersecting that path and allow me to select those stones. Very, very useful tool that we have here inside EasyStone, and that's why we've built in, this specialized functionality. Now you saw how it worked on a circle, but certainly we could use our 3-point curve tool, and we could only select, we'll just draw out a little curve, and anything that is intersecting that curve, it'll pick up, and we could change the color of. Okay, so again, very, very handy functionality, being able to select on a curve, because then we don't have to worry about using our freehand pick tool. And of course, we have additional selection options here that will absolutely boggle the mind, as far as isolating stones by color, by size, by color and size, by the name of the stone, by the outline color, by the outline width. I mean, there's so many different ways to be able to make selections here in EasyStone. The most powerful selection functionality in any software I have ever seen. For example, most software programs, if I want to select by color, it'll allow you to select by color. Most of your rhinestone programs will allow you to even select by size. Most of your rhinestone programs will let you select by size and by color. But where EasyStone is special is, let me show you just one quick example. Where EasyStone really shines is in most programs, when you select by color, it'll look at the entire design and select that color. Well, that makes sense, but there are many, many times, like and most of the time when I'm designing, I have more than one copy of something. And so, for example, let's just say I want to isolate red stones, for example, because I want to do something different with them. So in my example, where EasyStone comes special, is I select a red stone, I mark it, then I say, okay, well, what red stones do I want to identify? Well, I don't want to identify all the red stones. I just want to identify some of them. So I'm going to make a selection and ask EasyStone, okay, in this selection, isolate the red stones. So all I have to do is hit create selection, and just the red stones that were in that selection are isolated. Most programs don't have that functionality. So now I can change the color of just the red stones that I had selected. Most programs will select the color of stones in the entire design. They don't allow you to isolate stones only in the selected area. So likewise, we'll go ahead and we'll mark a stone and say, okay, now I've got all kinds of stones selected, but just pick up stones that are Capri blue because I want to change those out. See? So lots of specialized functionality in regards to making selections, and it is so critical because it will definitely make our design work a lot easier if we have this specialized functionality. So I won't bore you anymore about making selections, but just know that there are certain functionalities here in CorelDRAW which are really killer functionality, and that's only further enhanced by the selection tools here inside EasyStone.